We're here with Greg Turner, four-time winner on the European Tour, two-time New Zealand Open winner, and of course a member of that famous 1998 President's Cup winning side. Greg, thanks very much for joining us. Let's start off right back at the beginning, Greg, where it began, and you were born into what could be argued a very talented sporting Dunedin family. Your brother, obviously quite a famous cricketer representing New Zealand, and you had another brother that was representing New Zealand in hockey. How did you gravitate with that in the family? How did you actually gravitate towards golf?
Well, yeah, I mean, I sometimes joke, I feel like I had sort of three fathers rather than two brothers. Glenn, they're sort of 16 and 20 years older than me. So it'd be fair to say there wasn't a lot of backyard cricket played with me. But yeah, I mean, I guess I just grew up in an environment where excelling at sport was normal. So I suspect that had an impact in terms of, making or making me feel that that excelling was possible. I think there's a big hurdle to overcome when you're a young person in terms of wondering whether you could ever be good enough to achieve an elite sport, and I guess that was removed from me a bit because it was sort of in the family anyway. I sometimes joke a bit about, I get asked why I play golf, and I remember Glenn coming back from a tour of the West Indies, and I would have been, I guess I was maybe 10 or 11 or something like that, and he'd had 4 double hundreds in that tour, and against a pretty fearsome West Indies bowling attack, and he was getting changed to go and play cricket for Green Island because that's what you did in those days. You played club cricket as well. And I wandered into the room and he was getting changed anyway. He was absolutely black and blue. I mean, he'd been pummeled. He'd batted for hours against that West Indian attack. And I mean, he was bruised beyond belief. And I think it occurred to me at the time, shit, if that's what you get when you're really good, maybe I'll play golf. But yeah, so being sort of effectively an only child, but with from an environment where excelling in sport was kind of normal. I think golf, was something I could do. I could do on my own. My best mate at high school, a guy I'd never met before, was a guy named David Skeggs. His old man happened to be the mayor at the time, which was handy. And he played golf, so we used to take me out. We'd go and started playing golf together when I was about, I guess that was at high school when I was about 13. So, but in those days you played all sports. But I still played a lot of cricket and a lot of hockey and some soccer and a bit of tennis, and but golf was sort of the thing that was easiest to do on your own, really.
So one thing that's quite evident these days, I mean, you've just talked about starting golf at 13, and I know a lot of people of your generation started around 13 and 14 because I guess you couldn't get into golf clubs before then. What do you think about kids these days, starting at 6 and 7 and 8?
Look, I think it's great that kids got the opportunity to start at an early age. That said, I don't think that means you've got to push them at an early age, and I don't think it's. And in general, I think trying to get kids to specialise too young is a mistake. I think that it's an awfully broad range of skills and talents that ultimately might lead you to become successful at any given sport, and I think that they evolve from all sorts of areas. For every time you see a Tiger Woods or someone like that, who knows how many young kids might have turned into great players if they hadn't been pushed so hard, if they'd been given an opportunity to have a more balanced and a broader sort of experience in sport. I think sport's great, and I'm certainly with our kids, we've encouraged them to play all sorts of sports, but and they'll, for my money, they'll specialise when they're ready to specialise, when they want to specialise. But the stuff you can learn, playing team sports, for instance, it's still going to stand you in good stead on a golf course in the future if that's where you're going to end up. So I don't think you can ever start too young, but I hate to see kids getting pushed too hard too soon.
Yep. So in terms of, you started at 13. In terms of your amateur career, did you play in club championships? Did you make representative sides for Otago at that stage? I mean, what was your first handicap? How quickly did you progress?
Yeah, my first handicap I had was 7. That's the highest I've ever been on. So, I I was a quick learner. I think I was always, I played a bit before I got a handicap. I joined up at Balnow's, which is a 9-hole course on the hill near Otago Boys. We used to play there a bit. We go to Chisholm, but we never really put any cards in. We just played around, and it wasn't until I joined Balmac when I suppose I was the Otago Golf Club. That is, of course, when I was I'm probably late 14, about 14, that I got a handicap. Yeah, so 7 was as high as I've ever been. But so I can't remember the first representative team I had. Otago had a really good, really strong team in those days. We had guys like Jeff Clark and Ronnie Johnson and Brian Newell and Mike Atkinson and John Finn and John Sanders. And, there was a whole heap of really good players. So it was a hard team to get into, but it was a good team to, it was good to be around guys that were really top amateurs. In fact, I can remember I'm pretty sure my first New Zealand amateur, funnily enough, was at Paraparaumu Beach. And I probably must have been only 16 or 17. And they used to have the New Zealand foursomes was on the day before. And I got to partner with Jeff Clark, who was one of the top amateurs in the country at the time. And that was a huge thrill for a young fella, around a course like Paraparaumu, which is, which straight away became one of my favourites and still is to this day. So funny how those little connections evolve.
Yeah, that would. Trying to think who won that year. Was that the late 70s? It would have been.
I think John Durry.
Might have been John Durry. Yeah, John Durry would have won.
Pretty sure John Durry beat John Finn in the final.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
I wasn't around for the final. But yeah, it was a great experience, and I can well remember really looking forward to going and playing Paraparaumu Beach. That I played quite a bit at Chisholm in Dunedin, so sort of developed a bit of a love of links golf anyway. So, and Paraparaumu was then and still probably is regarded as along with Tairidi as the two finest sort of links in the country, and it was a real an eye-opener is the wrong word, but I mean I think that cemented a love for links golf, which has endured till this day, really.
How quickly did you turn professional?
I went to university in the States. I got a college scholarship, and so I didn't turn. I turned professional straight after the World Amateur. The Eisenhower Trophy was. I played 2 of those. Once when I was my first year at college, and then in Hong Kong, and that was in '84. And that was sort of November '84. So I was 21, and I turned pro straight after that.
Yeah, okay, good. First time, obviously, I met you, Greg, was we walked around Mount Maunganui Golf Club together. I was the superintendent there, and I think that was where you had your first tournament victory, was it, or your first professional victory?
My first tournaments I played at the Airlines tournament at Titirangi. It was my first tournament as a pro, and then I'm pretty sure it was at Paraparaumu in the New Zealand Open. And I'm trying to think who were 84. That might have been. Would that have been Corey Paven?
Corey Paven won in '84. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, okay.
So,
yeah, and then the old PGA at the Mount, which was played over New Year, finished on New Year's Day.
I recall.
Yeah,
so,
and that was so that.
So you ended up on the European tour, and I'm thinking if you turned pro in '84, and I know you won a tournament in '86, that was a fairly quick ascent. These days, it can be a lot harder, I guess, and a lot longer to establish yourself on the tour. What was the pathway between turning professional and winning your first event?
Yeah, well, in those days, you sort of played. Well, the Australasian tour was a lot longer. We had a lot of state opens, and I think from memory, I want to say we had about 14 or 16 weeks in Australia and New Zealand. There was the PGA and New Zealand Open and the Airlines in New Zealand, and then and actually I remember going after this is how sort of naive I was a little bit. After winning the PGA, I went over to Tasmania Open, was a couple of weeks later, and I went pre-qualified at, I think it was Devonport Golf Club from memory. Anyway, I got through the pre-qualifying all right, which was always a bit of a, the 18-hole pre-qualifying is a bit of a shootout. And when I was coming out of the office after signing my card, the guy who was the chairman of or the secretary of the PGA at the time said to me, "Oh, why did you qualify today? That New Zealand PGA, you won the PGA, that makes you exempt."
All right.
So anyway, so no, I went and played Australia, and then sort of the pathway from there was to go up to Asia. There was a 9-week tour of Asia.
Were you doing this with other Kiwis at the time, or other Australasian mates? Or?
Plenty of Kiwis. There were lots of Kiwis playing then. You know, Frank Nobilo was a good player then. There was, you know, Simon Owen was still playing quite a bit. Stewie Reese and oh gosh, I'm trying to think who else. There was a bunch of Kiwis. Richard Coombs was playing a lot. You know, you could sort of play Australia and to a lesser extent Asia, and from being a club pro in those days too. Not so many up in Asia. I think there was just myself and Frank and a few of the Aussie boys. But the first tournament on that Asian tour was the Hong Kong Open, and I finished 4th in the World Amateur there, the Eisenhower, in November. So they were kind enough to give me an invite. And again, because qualifying, it was Monday qualifying, the old days where if you made the cut, you were in the next week. If you missed the cut, you went ahead and you had to pre-qualify on the Monday. And that was Asian tour was lots of guys out of America and Australia and from all over the place. There was some Swedes, and it was pretty competitive. So it was good to get an invite first week, and I made the cut. And so they got me in Malaysia, and I played pretty nicely. From memory, I think in Malaysia I finished 6th or 7th. And then we went off to Thailand, and I played okay, and then to India. And then came back to Singapore, and I lost in a playoff in Singapore. So that was what I did well enough in those first few weeks to get my exempt for the rest of the tour. So that was a real help. Little things make a big difference. And I sometimes say this to people when they look at young guys these days, man, you just need a break at the right time, and you can't underestimate how one break sometimes. If I hadn't got that invite into Hong Kong, maybe I would have missed the cut. If I'd have missed the cut there, would I have got in the next week? And the whole story might be different. So anyway, that was Asia, and then we sort of played around the Pacific Islands, and then I went off to the tour school in Europe. And the plan was my plan was to see if I get my card in Europe, to play a couple of years in Europe, and then go back to America. And I played nicely in tour school in Europe, finished 3rd, I think, behind Elazabal won. So he turned out to be not a bad player. Yeah. And an Argentinian guy, Adam Soa, who was a good player too. Anyway, got my card in Europe. Then it was back down to Australia and played Australia, Asia again, and was lucky enough to win in Singapore. So I lost in a playoff the year before, won in Singapore. So that sort of gave me some good momentum to carry forward into Europe. And then, I was lucky enough for my first season in Europe to win as a rookie in Scandinavia, beat Craig Stadler in a playoff.
Yeah, I see that.
So that kind of got me established there. So all in all, I had a pretty, relatively smooth ride, I suppose.
And then it looks like from '86 through to '89 that the career kind of stalled a little bit. You arrived back in New Zealand in '89 at Titirangi, and you missed the cut there at the Air New Zealand Shell Open. Do you remember that?
Well, I don't, but I'm sure you're right. Yeah, no, I played okay sort of through '87. Not great, but then it really went downhill. Had a long period of playing pretty poorly. So 89, I decided in '89 that I kind of got completely lost with the golf swing. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was about the time that Faldo was just starting to really shine, having gone through that Ledbetter, sort of David Ledbetter school, I guess. It was right in a big transition was happening in golf, technique-wise. I mean, I think the high-speed camera and had kind of proven that a few of the foundations upon which technique, I guess, had been built weren't accurate. It had always sort of been thought that swing path was the most important factor in determining outcome, and the high-speed camera kind of proved that actually it was club face that was more important than path. And the knock-on of that was a complete change, really, in the attitude to the way you you wanted to swing the club, you wanted to be a lot more by being more rotational, you could hold that club face squarer for longer. And it turned out that was more important than trying to keep the club path on the line. So I went through a really big transition. I worked with David Lebbett, his partner, a guy named Dennis Pugh, in Britain, and he completely tore the old swing up. And basically, I can remember nothing is belittling. He looked at the swing, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, tell me what you've been working on, what you've been trying to do." And and he said, "Well, we've got two choices. I can either try and take you back to where you were, or we can try and go forward to something completely different." And I said, "Well, which is going to be easier?" He said, "Well, I think it's just as far back as it is forward."
Right, yeah, okay.
So we sort of made the decision to throw out the old sort of swing, which was completely had to rebuild my thinking about what had to happen in a golf swing. So it was a huge. I think Dennis, to this day, I'll probably tell you, I probably made the biggest transition in terms of technique of anybody he'd ever worked with. So, but it was pretty humiliating for a start. I remember going. The first session I had with him after the initial one, when he looked at the swing, when we started working on it, it was the week of the British PGA, and we went down, or the week after the British PGA, and we went down to the practice fairway at the back end of Wentworth, so they could be on our own, because I was literally just hitting shanks and tops, and I mean it was pretty painful. And just as we'd started, Faldo turned up with a film crew from Golf Digest. He just won the PGA and he won the Masters, and and they were filming for a thing. And so there was Faldo standing alongside me, just flushing these, making perfect swings and hitting these frozen ropes, and there was me hitting tops and shanks.
Right.
So Dennis said to me afterwards, he said, "Look," he said, "you've proved a lot to me." He said, "If you can stand there and have the discipline and the humility to deal to do that, to go through that, then I reckon you're going to be all right." And so anyway, it was pretty bad for a while, and I lost my card in Europe that year, and so I came back to New Zealand, and I was starting to play a little bit better, but not. I was still a long way away from feeling like I knew what I was doing with the swing. But I turned up at Paraparaumu, and obviously a course I really liked, and the field was probably a bit weaker that year than it had been, and I played okay, and managed to get myself with a chance on Sunday, and I was lucky on Sunday. The weather was absolutely perfect. It basically didn't blow a breath. All I could do was hit 30-yard cuts. That was kind of the only thing in the arsenal with the big swing changes I've been working on, but. And that would have been a real problem if it had been windy, but it wasn't. And I played it pretty good. I think I might have shot 66 in the last round, and ended up winning by 4 or 5 or something. And and what a huge, and with the benefit of hindsight, that was a massive. If you had to pick a moment, I guess in my career, things were looking pretty bleak. And,
you were quoted in the newspaper following that win, saying that it was you were pretty much ready to give the game away, and if you hadn't won that,
I was definitely broke, and I was heading off back to the tour school. If I hadn't made my card at the tour school, that could well have been. That might have been it. As it turned out, as I won there, and then went back to. Played the World Cup, which was in Spain with Simon Owen, and I think we finished 6th or 7th, which made a few bob. And then went off to the tour school and got my card back, and sort of that was the sort of rebirth of my career a little bit, if you like. So it's interesting. Obviously, I met you formally in 2005 when we walked around Mount Maunganui together, but I'd been stalking you for several years previous to that, Greg, and I was just a young fella during those wonderful years we had at Paraparaumu when the New Zealand Open was almost in town every year, and it was a regular fixture. And I was part of that crowd, and I mean I was a big Frank Noblo fan as well, and I think like a lot of that gallery, Frank had a lot of people riding on his shoulders that day, and desperate for a New Zealander to win the event again. And there was this
famous 12 minutes, which occurred with Frank on the 5th hole and you on the 7th hole, which absolutely turned the tournament upside down. Frank, of course, went side to side and walked off with a triple bogey at the same time that you had just sunk a birdie on 7, and there was a 5-shot swing happened, in the space over a couple of holes, but it was those 12 minutes of that really flipped it on its head.
Yeah, I was kind of oblivious because I was a couple behind, and I'd started okay. I think I birdied. Oh, I might have birdied a couple of holes early. I think I might have. Okay, yeah, two. All right. Yeah. So, I'd had a couple of birdies, and then there was a big crowd following Frank. There wasn't a lot of people following us from memory. And and I remember going down 7, and all of a sudden, this sort of a lot of the crowd. There was quite an influx of people, and I made birdie there, and I thought, I must be pretty close. And I remember there was a scoreboard at the back of the 8th green, and I looked up there, and I think I had a 4-shot lead from memory. I mean, it was
5 shots.
I'd gone.
It was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it might have been 4. Anyway.
Sorry, you're right.
So,
yeah.
And it was like, wow, and that's a kind of an interesting. An interesting position, because you're sort of, on the one hand, you don't want to be looking at the scoreboard, but on the other hand, it's quite a change from going from chasing to being 4 in front.
Yeah.
And I remember on 9, the pin was right up the back on 9, and I was just in the rough off the tee, and I thought, don't be silly, don't be hitting at this flag. There was a pretty out of bounds up there, and water, and it's pretty narrow right at the back of that green.
Yeah.
And I thought, just hit it in the middle of the green, and it just came out a little bit hot, and I guess I was a little bit of a drill, and that thing came up to about 3 feet from the hole. Yeah. And I tapped that in for birdie, and everybody said, what a brave shot that was. And it wasn't brave at all. It was a flyer.
It was interesting, just poring over some of the news articles of that event. Looking at what clubs were getting played, and the 17th hole, for example, you'd had a triple bogey in the 2nd round, and that's quite fascinating. I mean, you've gone on to win a tournament by 6 shots, and you had a triple bogey in the 2nd round on 17. You had a 2-iron 2nd shot to the right hand side of the green, and failed to get up a couple of times. Amazing. Yeah. You hitting, yeah.
Well, it was interesting. I was talking to, funnily enough, I was having a conversation with Steve Williams down at the New Zealand Open recently, and we were just, he was caddying for Ryan Fox, of course, and he's told the story about, when he first went out there, he got to caddy for Peter Thompson early on. I don't know, it was over a number of events. He said, he said, I well remember 160 yards was a 4-iron for Peter. So that's 100 meters, He said, well, he said, that's a wedge for Foxy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just watching some of the Masters reruns over the weekend, and seeing Jack Nicklaus was hitting a 5-iron into 18, which is now, that's kind of, they had a wedge to 9-iron in there these days.
And probably the tee's probably 30 yards back from where it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's extraordinary. I mean, how much, it's like anything. It's, when things happen in small increments, you kind of don't notice so much. And sometimes it takes, a look, quite a long way back. I remember the first time it really came home to me on what had changed. And it wasn't so much in distance, but we played, in the early days in Europe, we played the Irish Open at Portmarnock. Many years, and there's a par 3 there. I want to say it's like 15 along the coast, and narrow green, and the beach, sort of dunes and beach on the right, and the wind used to blow quite hard, either off the sea or the other way, and when it blew the other way, you used to stand up there and you used to have to aim this damn thing with the old Pro Traj Titleist. You used to aim this thing sort of 20 yards left of the green and just pray that it would hang on. And we hadn't been there in about 10 years, and I got up there in the event, and now we had the Pro V1s and whatever, and it was howling off the left, and you were aiming at the left edge of the green, and then just praying that it would fall right. and
Right.
and it was like, that's how much difference. So it wasn't only the distance, but the way the ball travels through the wind now. Just the aerodynamics of it. I'm damned if I know how they do it, but it just does not move in the air anything like it used to. And as a consequence, you can't actually hit as many golf shots as you used to. You can't. That was obviously the amount it moved in the air could be a problem, but could also be a blessing if you were having to try and hit a cut up or trying to work the ball on the breeze. But that shot's not really part of the arsenal anymore because the equipment doesn't really allow you to do it.
Right. So you won 89, almost a catalyst for turning things around. You then went through quite a purple patch. You won the Johnny Walker Classic. Was that at Melbourne? Was that at Royal Melbourne?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then you went on in 91. You won, or you found yourself. You did win, but you found yourself in the final pairing with the world's #1 golfer, Greg Norman, at the Diakio Palm Meadows Classic. Tell us a bit about, growing up, the Shark was one of my favourites. I'll put a disclaimer out there. Absolutely fascinating ball striker. He has an amazing presence. What was it like standing on that first tee with the world's #1 golfer?
Yeah, look, it was interesting. That was a purple patch for golf in Australia as well. There was a bunch of money flooding in from the Japanese market. The Japanese that opened resorts, Palm Meadows, Sanctuary Cove, the Vines were all Japanese money, and they were pouring a lot of money into events. We were playing for what at the time was seemed like a fortune. It was well over $1 million Australian dollars, I think, each of those events. And back in the early 90s, that was a truckload of cash. So as a consequence, you had, we probably had 10 of the top 20 players in the world came down for the likes of Johnny Walker and Palm Meadows. There was obviously the top Australians, guys like Norman and David Graham, and but the Faldos and Woosnams, and Raymond Floyd, I think, was there from memory, and Curtis Strange. Those were sort of names that travelled. So I'd had a really good win at Johnny Walker. Royal Melbourne has always been just one of my absolute favourite golf courses. So to win around a course like that was very pleasing, and also to win against a field like that. I hadn't been expected to win there, but I was playing okay, and I played really nicely the last day especially, and won that in the end relatively comfortably. I think it was like Ian Baker Finch and I came down the stretch there, and he had a bit of a disaster the last few holes, So I went in. That was when we broke for Christmas, and then went into Palm Meadows. So still feeling pretty good. I'd sort of last start win. It's always nice against a field like that.
Yeah.
And I remember I shot 74 in the first round, and actually played okay. And cut was going to be level 1 under or something. It was course wasn't difficult. And then I shot 62 on Friday, and it was really strange because sitting in the press centre afterwards, they were saying, "Well, how did you manage to turn it around so much?" And it's a funny game, golf. I said, "Well, look, to be frank, I didn't play that differently. Yesterday I hit 3 bad tee shots. All of them ended up dead, and I made 2 bogeys and a double out of them. And today I hit 3 bad tee shots, and all of them ended up okay, and I made 2 birdies off of them. And got on a roll, and instead I hit the lip 4 or 5 times yesterday, and every time it looked like hitting the lip today, it went in. And and it's hard to explain to people that haven't been there how one day can be 2 over and the next day can be 10 under, and and they're not that different. But anyway, so I was still, I was I don't know what world ranking I would have been, 150 or 200 in the world, and I'm playing with Norman on the Saturday, and of course he's a Queensland boy, so the local hero, and the best player in the world at the time, easily. As you say, one of the most impressive ball strikers of all time, probably. And we get on the first tee, and the first tee, it pretty much it's the same every week. You go to the score and you get your card, and then you pin sheet, and then you go over and you trade cards with the guy you're playing with. That's sort of. And I remember, and I got I was pretty nervous playing with Greg, and huge crowd, and I went over to exchange cards, and he looked at me with those blue eyes, steel blue eyes, and said, "I'll swap cards with you when I'm ready to swap cards with you," and turned his back. And I just thought, wow, that's. And I went to my caddy, who's a guy named Alistair Musgrove. I said, wow. I told him what had happened. I said, why is Greg Norman worried about me?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess he was trying to intimidate, and he didn't need to intimidate me. He was he was intimidating enough, but I actually got quite a kick out of it. For me, that was sort of almost that gave me a little bit of confidence. I sort of felt like, well, maybe I'm better than if I'm good enough for Greg Norman to be worried, then that's a pretty good sign. And and in the end, I think I won. I think I won that by 4 as well. So it was a good few weeks.
That'll be a good cushion coming down the 18th. There's a lot of water down there from memory.
Well, it was funny because Roger Davis was actually playing in front of us, and he was running second. And and it's a par 5 over water and
double carry or something. It might be as well.
It
might be a double carry. Well, a double carry for a bogey golfer, but there's a fair bit of intimidation.
Basically, yeah. If you wanted to get to the green in 2, you had to take it over the water, and it wasn't a long carry, but it was it was far enough that you didn't want to miss it, and that would give you the opportunity to go at the green, which is again across the water, and 4 shots sounds like a lot, but I just thought, well, the only way you can not win this. I mean, it's possible that Davis could have made eagle in front. So 6 was a winning. I had to make 6 to be sure. And I thought the only way you can screw this up is to try and hit it across the water and completely miss it and hit it in the drink, and then you're on the tee playing 3, and then all of a sudden then you're a complete idiot. So don't be an idiot. So I just had an iron down the left side. I got a bit of stick. The crowd gave me a bit of stick, about about being a bit of a pussy hitting it down the left. And I said to my caddy, I'm happy to be the pussy with the winner's check at the end of it.
Enough.
And I laid it up and hit it on, and as it turned out, Davis only made par anyway. So, and never count your chickens. I remember the New Zealand Open I won at what's now Royal Auckland, Middlemore. I had I think I had a 4 or 5, might have been a 4-shot lead, standing on 18 there. But I wasn't going to smile until I hit it down the fairway there again with the out of bounds on the right.
I saw a New Zealand Open winner put it out of bounds on 18 at Middlemore, 2003. He still won, thankfully. So golf's largely an individual sport, but obviously on occasions you've got to represent your country through the World Cup of Golf and the Alfred Dunhill as well. There's a little piece of advice I heard you mention on an interview a number of years ago, which has since become known as the Turner tip, and I've used it on a couple of occasions. Firstly for myself, but I've also been fortunate to caddy for a couple of events at your new course, Tara Eddy. And they had a member guest event there, and the person I was caddying for was actually Tom Doak, and he had he was going quite deep into this member guest event, and a lot of people that were finishing were coming in to spectate, and I thought it'd be a really proud moment for Tom, on his course, leading his event, to have all these people coming in and watching him. But he was getting incredibly nervous, the more matches finished and the more people turned up. So I imparted a little tip to him that I'd learnt off you, and when he sunk a clutch putt to win his match, he turned around and he said, "Thanks for the Turner tip." Now, I believe that came from, was it the Alfred Dunhill or the World Cup? You're at St Andrews and you're on the 18th and you were standing over a modest putt yourself.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not sure exactly what the tip was, to be honest, but I can tell you the story.
Yes.
Dunhill Cup. We were playing South Africa in the semi-final to see who went out and to play. I think Australia might have been playing the other semi against the United States. And yeah, I'd always had a pretty decent reputation in terms of as a, you know, I had a pretty good record when I was in front. I think I had 7. I'm pretty sure I led 7 times going in the last round and was fortunate enough to win each time. So it's sort of the you know, the word doesn't go around, but you know, people you get a bit of a reputation as being a good finisher, a good closer, and that's kind of helpful when you're in that situation, because the guys you're playing against probably know that you've got a reputation as a good closer. So that can, I guess, well, intimidating is probably not the right word, but that can have an impact. And so anyway, I was playing Retief Hoosen actually, and I think from memory, Frank had got beaten by Ernie Els, and Grant Waite I think was our third, and he'd beaten Wayne Westner, I think it was. Anyway, so I came down to my match, and I had the Doug Sanders part. Yep. Interesting, I think Doug just passed away yesterday or the day before. So sad news to you.
Sadly, yeah.
Yeah, so for those who can remember, Doug had that sort of 3.5, 4 footer downhill left right on the 18th green to win the Open, to beat Nicklaus, and famously missed it. And I had that part. It was sort of it was left edge, just outside left downhill. I mean, if you want an intimidating place to have a pretty significant putt to hold, then 18th green at the old course is probably about as intimidating as it gets. And then you're in a team event, and you're representing your country. You've got your teammates, and so the whole it was a pretty intense moment, I guess. And I remember standing over that putt and looking down, and the putter head was shimmering, shaking. And I remember chuckling. I pulled away and had a little laugh to myself. I said, "Well, if the putter wasn't shaking a bit at the moment, then you wouldn't be human, would you?" And okay, so that's okay. And you know what to do. Go through your routines and take a few deep breaths, and recognise that that's exactly what ought to happen. And anyway, I was fortunate enough to make the putt, and I'm not sure what the tip was that came out of that, but
the Turner tip. It was again just channeling those nerves positively. So
I'm a great believer in the fact that I think that the idea that some people have got ice in their veins, is a bit of a nonsense. I think the guys that do the best under pressure are simply the ones that recognise what's happening to them when they get under pressure, recognise that physiological differences and psychological differences occur when you're full of adrenaline, and when it starts pumping. They recognise that quickly, and then they have identified what it is they need to do differently in order to be doing things the same. If that makes any sense. For me, certainly it was, I think I was quite quick to recognise when I was, when there was adrenaline starting to flow, and to what extent I needed to slow down. For me, the golf swing had to feel longer and slower when I was in that situation for it to be the same. If it felt normal, then it was short and fast. That was what the nature of it, or certainly the way adrenaline affected me. So I was, if I was good at anything, I think it was I was quite good at recognizing when that was happening and not becoming too fazed by it. And as a consequence, I generally did okay when I was in that space. And because not everybody does that, if you do okay when you're in that space, then probably things work out better than they do for a lot of people. And but yeah, it's interesting the things you can remember quite vividly. I can quite vividly remember that part.
Yeah. And it's interesting you're talking right back at the start there about your brother Glenn turning up with bruising all over him. And again, I listened to a New Zealand cricketer speak one night in an after dinner speech, and he was talking about fear and how to channel that fear, and how the very best players in his profession of cricket learn to actually overcome that fear. So to channel that fear and then deal with that fear very quickly. And I can imagine, with all those bruising over your brother, and the fact that he still managed to score 4 double centuries was probably no better example than right there. Hey, so 1998, the President's Cup came to Royal Melbourne. Again, Leo Barber's still stalking you because he's working on the ground staff at Royal Melbourne by that stage. And I managed to get a rake and a bucket in my hand and follow your group in the last day. You're playing Mark Calcavecchia in the singles. I popped my All Black socks on. I had an All Black cap on as well as my uniform. And of course, we had a rain delay there. We had a rain delay, probably 6 or 7 holes in. And I perched under the tree, just expectantly that perhaps Greg Turner at some stage might recognise the All Black paraphernalia, but it wasn't to be. But that was a wonderful event. Greg, obviously yourself and Frank being selected as wild cards by Peter Thompson was both a great gesture, but also a very calculated move on his behalf, because you repaid that with tenfold. And I still remember that putt, that 18th hole to kick the event off. You were the leading group out. Talk us through that.
Yeah, that was the good thing about when you win, you get to write the history, don't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, it turned out I was lucky enough to be at the President's Cup this year as well, late last year, I guess, and still a lot of fond memories. And indeed, one of the preview shows they talked about, and in the newspapers they talked about the captain's picks through the years that have turned out really well, and Frank and I turned out to be that, and which was fortunate. Yeah, it was. I mean, Tomo took a bit of a gamble, picking 2 Kiwis. There was a young Aussie called Robert Allenby. Everybody thought Tomo was
lived over the back fence.
That's right, and had a record worth that. But anyway, Tomo, for whatever reason, decided that or felt that because of the extent that Frank and I had played together in World Cups and Dunhill Cups through the years, and both of us were in reasonable form, that experience would be valuable in a team situation. That he felt that the different pressures of partnering in things like foursomes and four balls, there was a different pressure, and that because we'd done that a bit, that we would be well placed to handle that situation. And as it turned out all right for us. We were actually first up for that first day, first match out. Yeah. Was against a couple of guys named David Duval and Mark O'Meara, who I think were number 1 and 3 in the world at the time. So we weren't terribly hot favourites, to be fair to say. Yeah. And I remember Tomo being interviewed and saying, why did you put it was 8 o'clock in the morning, it was tea time on that first one. Why did you put the Kiwis out first? And he said, it's a couple of hours earlier in New Zealand. So
look, yeah.
But yeah, I hit the first shot, actually. It was foursomes. And I thought you get on the first tee of an Open Championship at St Andrews or wherever. That's a pretty excruciating place to be. So I thought but I wasn't ready for the President's Cup. I mean, that was a whole different level again. Just because of the atmosphere, the Australians really, as you'll be well aware, they really got behind the event. It was a much bigger event than I envisaged it was going to be. It was a much bigger build-up. Being in a team of 12, when you looked at our team, I mean, the American team was obviously enormous, but when you looked at the international team, guys like Norman and Vijay Singh and Ernie Els and Nick Price, you're talking greats of the game, and so just to be in that company and amongst them on the same thing, was added another layer of complexity, I guess. And I remember walking through to the first tee, quite a long walk from the clubhouse to the hole they play as the first in that composite for the President's Cup composite, and there's the 20,000 Aussies there all started chanting Kiwi, Kiwi, Kiwi. Well, that's a bit unnerving. We haven't had that much support from the Aussies since Gallipoli. But and then to walk down onto the first tee and there's the welcoming group, and you're shaking hands with there's Jack Nicklaus and Peter Thompson and John Howard and George Bush. So shake their hands and then you've got a hit. Yeah. I've never been so happy to see a ball get airborne and go in the general direction But it was just a fantastic week, and we really gelled well as a team. I actually wasn't playing that well going into it. I played really well most of the year, and I was just starting to struggle. The form wasn't fantastic. But I managed to hold it together and play well enough to end up with Frank and I had a great win that day, and we had a really good win the next morning against Davis Love and Justin Leonard, I think, and then I had a half in the end with Kalkavikia, so I had I could feel like I made a decent contribution. But that was a great course, an incredible event. That was one of the weeks, perhaps the week I look back on most fondness.
Yeah. Likewise, Greg. It was fantastic. I remember just standing behind the 18th green and watching the players come off, and they came over to the ground staff and they were high-fiving and thanking us. It was unbelievable. It was a great atmosphere.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't notice the All Black. I must have been in the zone.
I just didn't get your handshake, but I did get your golf ball. Yeah. Hey, look, moving forward again, and I said I wasn't going to get controversial, but the last time you played in the New Zealand Open at Paraparaumu Beach was 2002, the infamous Tiger Open. And I'll tread very carefully through this, but it was controversial for a number of different reasons, and I've heard different urban legends on what went on. But you obviously personally didn't have a very happy event. Stuck on Kapiti Road, I believe, perhaps before your first tee time or second tee time.
Oh, yeah, the whole week was a bit of a palaver. Yeah, it was a shame. I mean, it's what happens when you let investment bankers get into it.
Yeah, well, true.
Look, it was. It was sad in a number of ways. I mean, it was a great idea, and it just, got out of hand. It all got a little bit hijacked. I don't hold any grudges for that, or I just think that bit of hubris, and a lot of people got a little bit carried away and probably forgot what the event was about and forgot what so it was pretty uncomfortable, and it was a nightmare trying to play, and we got locked out. We couldn't. The driving range was down at a school nearby. I can't remember where it was.
Paraparaumu College, yeah.
Yeah, I was playing in the group. I must have been playing in the group in front of Tiger, I think. And so we came back, and they wouldn't let the courtesy cars onto the golf course because Tiger was due to arrive. It's we had to go up the road and walk back down on the spikes in those days. Yeah. It was just it was the week was full of memories, none of them particularly happy, but and it was a shame because it could have been. It was a wonderful thing to have him there, and it just I just think a few people lost a little bit of perspective, and with the and it sort of ended up I think probably financially it ended up a bit of a disaster for all involved as well, but so it didn't turn out that well, but nobody died.
Hey, so speaking of memories, just to almost finish up, your favourite hole at Paraparaumu Beach, and perhaps if you describe the hole as you would stand on the tee and as if you were playing it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night. I'm incredibly fond of the golf course. I think it's underrated as a golf course, but it's not. But it's one of those, that whatever that expression goes about the sum of it being greater than the sum of the individual parts, and I think that probably applies at Paraparaumu. And there's lots of holes that have got real merit, and probably, but it is the sum. It's them in totality that kind of makes the course what it is. It's a great little group of par threes because they're all quite different, and they vary in different ways. They go in different, they as a group, individually, I know, probably the 16th is the one that gets the most attention because it's likened to the postage stamp. But I don't think any one of them individually is the best par 3 in the country, but as a collection, they really, they make a great collection. 17, I think 17 is and certainly was perhaps my favourite hole there. I think technology has rendered some of the interest in that hole a little less than it used to be. When it was a really good hit to get up on the left, then the decision making about where's the wind, where's the pin, do I go down the right, that sort of thing doesn't seem. I think technology's rendered a little bit of that less important than it was. So it's taken away some of the complexity of the decision making that used to exist on that tee. If I had to choose a single hole there, I won't. I'm going to sit on the fence a bit. I think Paraparaumu has a great a number of really good short fours. I've always been really fond of the 8th hole. It's a pretty simple little green, tiny little green. You're just drawn to going down the right side there all the time, and it's just not the place to approach from. So a hole that looks quite simple but just draws you in a direction. And the 10th hole, the 10th is not a pretty golf hole, but again, it's just any time you stand on the tee and you're thinking that any club in the bag from a 5-iron up could be the right shot to hit, then that always intrigues me. And I think 10's a great little hole. It's not the prettiest little hole. The architecture down the left side is not it's not country club architecture. It's but it's a fascinating little golf hole. So I love 6 as well. And funnily enough, and now I'm going to call every hole on the golf course shortly. But
here goes the sum of the parts coming up.
Yeah, that's right. A hole that probably isn't a lot of people's favourites would be 15, but I've always, it's a blind tee shot, which I don't mind. It's a blind tee shot that opens up rather than closes up, but it's such a great little green location, and there is knowing where the flag is and where the wind is, and there's a real advantage in hitting a great tee shot down there on a hole that looks like you can kind of hit it anywhere. So those are probably the holes that stand out the most for me. Again, probably a lot of people talk about 13, I suppose. It's a hole that that's it's got a great backdrop, and it's a really strong 4. I've never thought it was one of the best holes on the golf course because it never seemed to, you just got to hit 2 good golf shots. To me 13 was just a test of execution. Not taking anything away from it, but it's a good hole, but I just never felt as I think people probably think of it more because of the backdrop, as you turn back to the hills.
Or difficulty. It's that old argument. Does a difficult golf hole necessarily make it a great golf hole? Yeah. So, as I said, it's a good hole. I don't want to take anything away from it, but it never occurred to me that it was one of the best or more memorable holes at Paraparaumu. But and 18, 18's I much prefer 18 from the tee as it's played now, the old tee rather. So interesting. I'd like to hear your thoughts on 18 because it can be quite a maligned finishing hole.
It's a par 4, really, isn't it?
Well, that's the argument. If you call it a par 4, does that all of a sudden make it a great finish?
Exactly.
A strong hole.
I had a really interesting conversation with Peter Dawson, the former secretary of the R&A, when he was out here a few years ago. We were discussing over a wine or two about the things in the game. If we could turn the clock back and if you could change, what would they be? And for me, par would be one of them. I think we've got fixated with this idea of par, and to me, well, for one thing, you go out and play Carnoustie on a dead calm day. and then play it in a 60 knot northerly, and the par's still 72.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, it's 10 shots harder. You know, so it's just it's a subjective thing anyway. But but people, a lot of the most interesting holes in golf are the ones that kind of don't fit terribly comfortably into par. They're that sort of it's too long for a par 3, but it's too short for a par 4. You know, and same with it. It's too long for a par 4, but it's too short for a par 5. Well, is it interesting? Is it intriguing? Does it ask you to hit different shots? Does it make you make decisions? Does it offer you a shot that you don't want to hit? So to me, those things are more important than, is it a par 4? Is it a par 5?
It's interesting looking at Alec Russell's notes up in our clubhouse. I mean, he talked about the 3 par 5s being actually par 4.5s. That was actually how he designed them.
Yeah. Well, I think of at Millbrook on the Coronet course at Millbrook, 5 and 6. I've always said to people, they're par 9. You know, there are plenty of days when 5 actually is, 5 is the par 4 on the card, and 6 is the par 5 on the card. But there are often occasions when 5 plays harder than 6 does. So they're a par 9. If you want to put par around it. But I just think the slopes on 18 at Paraparaumu work better, and the decisions work better from that right-hand tee. I thought the tee that they, trying to gain a little bit of distance that they used for that Tiger Woods Open, it just wasn't as good a hole from back there. The angles weren't nearly as interesting. The slopes didn't work as well. So, and again, it's, if you wanted to analyze Paraparaumu on a hole-by-hole basis and stuff, you go, well, internal out of bounds is not, which is the same on 9. You sort of shy away from internal out of bounds, but what the hell, you wouldn't ideally do that, but if you were starting from scratch, but it is what it is, and it's not hiding.
Yeah.
So, whether you need it or not, it's a different question, but it's an interesting hole. You want to make 3 there. You want to give yourself a chance of making 3. Then especially when you've got a little breeze, as it has been known to blow occasionally on the Kapiti Coast, a little breeze into you. Then you better you better hit a good tee shot, and you better hit it down that dangerous line. And it's seldom do you stand on that tee and not think about that.
Well, Greg, I look forward to sharing a game of golf with you again, hopefully at Paraparaumu Beach. Always good to talk to you. Thanks once again for those Turner tips. I really appreciate it, Greg. Thank you so much.
It's always good to talk. We'll see you on the links, hopefully not too long.